You can sleep in the
I
garage,
don't think this is
old
the right
man.
time.
We have
My
to talk about
daughter-in-law
it
said it
eventually,
at exactly 7.
but not here.
41 p.m.
tell me
I
when.
remember because the microwave clock
We have
blinked
to
in the
talk
kitchen
about this.
behind her, and the number burned
need
itself
proper
into my
care.
mind as clearly as the words
We
did.
can't keep ignoring it.
It was a Tuesday night. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and roasted chicken. I was sitting at the dining table going over the quarterly statement from my brokerage account when Lauren walked in holding a clipboard and a measuring tape. My son, Eric, followed a few seconds later. 42 of my relatives are coming for Thanksgiving, Lauren said briskly, as if announcing a weather forecast. We're going to need more space. More space, I repeated. Eric cleared his throat. Dad, it's just for the week. Just for the week, Lauren added. My parents are driving in from Ohio. They need the master bedroom. You can sleep in the garage. The garage. I've lived in that house for 43 years. I replaced the roof myself in '92. I paid off the mortgage 7 years ago. I installed the hardwood floors with my own hands after Margaret, and I argued about carpet. The garage still smells faintly of oil and cedar from the shelves I built when Eric was 12. You want me to sleep next to the lawnmower, I said calmly. It's heated, Lauren replied. We'll clear a spot. Eric tried to soften it. Dad, it's just easier this way. Easier for whom? I didn't raise my voice. That's never been my way. I set the brokerage statement down carefully and folded my hands on the table. And where will you sleep? I asked. In the guest room, Lauren said quickly. And your parents? In your room, she answered without hesitation. My room. I studied her face. There was no malice in it, just certainty, the kind that comes when someone has already decided the outcome and believes the rest is formality. You didn't ask, I said. Lauren shifted her weight. We assumed you'd understand. Assumed. That word carries more weight than most insults. Eric walked around the table and placed a hand on my shoulder. Dad, we're trying to make this smooth. 42 people in this house is a lot. It was built to hold a family, I said. Not that many. Silence stretched between us. I looked toward the hallway that led to the master bedroom. Margaret's quilt still covered the bed. Her jewelry box sat on the dresser. I hadn't moved it since she passed. You can sleep in the garage, old man, Lauren repeated, softer this time, as if gentler delivery might make it reasonable. There are moments in life when anger rises quickly. This was not one of them. What rose instead was clarity. I smiled. Perfect, I said. Lauren blinked. Perfect, she repeated. Yes, you two can cook, clean, and host 42 guests. I won't be in the way. Eric frowned. What does that mean? It means, I said evenly, I won't be sleeping in the garage. Lauren crossed her arms. Then where will you go? I'll make arrangements. I stood, walked down the hallway, and opened the closet in the master bedroom. A suitcase sat on the top shelf. I brought it down and placed it on the bed. Eric followed me. Dad, don't be dramatic. I'm not. It's 1 week. 1 week becomes a precedent. He didn't respond to that. The next morning at 9:02 a.m., I drove to Oakridge Realty. Mark Reynolds had sold 3 houses on our street in the last year. He knew the neighborhood, knew the market, knew the value of brick colonials with mature oak trees in the yard. When I stepped into his office, he looked surprised. Mr. Lawson, he said, I was actually planning to stop by your place later this week. I'm aware, I replied. His expression changed subtly. Your daughter-in-law mentioned a possible listing, he said carefully. I'm sure she did. We sat down. The house is in the Lawson Family Trust, I said, placing a single sheet of paper on his desk. I am the sole trustee. He glanced at the document. Yes, I see that. There will be no listing, I said. Understood. If anyone approaches you about it without my written authorization, you will decline. He nodded slowly. Of course. There was a flicker in his eyes, the moment he realized the situation was not as straightforward as it had been presented to him. I'll make a note in the file, he added. Please do. When I returned home, I found the garage already half cleared. Eric had moved my workbench against the far wall. A twin mattress leaned against a stack of paint cans. Lauren stood in the doorway. Just preparing, she said. For what? In case you change your mind. I won't. She studied me for a long moment. You're being stubborn. No, I replied. I'm being steady. That afternoon, a black SUV pulled into the driveway. 42 relatives arrive early. Laughter spilled out onto the lawn before the doors even closed. Lauren's parents stepped out first. Oh, it's lovely, her mother said, looking at the house as if she were evaluating it. I stood on the porch, hands in my pockets. Eric walked up beside me. Dad, he said quietly, let's not make this awkward. I won't. Just stay out of the way. Out of the way. As if I were furniture. The relatives streamed inside, the living room filled with unfamiliar coats and loud voices. Someone asked where to put the pies. Someone else commented on the square footage. Lauren's father stepped into the hallway and opened the master bedroom door without knocking. Nice size, he said. I watched from the doorway. Lauren turned to me. We'll move your things tonight. Don't, I said. Dad. Don't. The doorbell rang again. Eric moved to answer it. When he opened the door, Mark Reynolds stood there, leather folder in hand. Evening, Mark said. I was told to come by at 7:45. Lauren's face went pale. I thought we cancelled, she said. You asked for a comparative market analysis, Mark replied. I brought it. The room grew quieter. Eric looked at me. I stepped forward. Mark, I said evenly, perhaps you should clarify something for everyone. He glanced at me, then at the crowd. The property, he began carefully, is held in a living trust. Only the trustee may authorize any listing. And who is the trustee? Lauren's mother asked. Mark met my eyes. Mr. Lawson. Silence. Eric's jaw tightened. Lauren's clipboard slipped slightly in her hand. I smiled again. Not triumphantly. Simply steadily. Because when someone tells you to sleep in the garage in your own house, the most powerful response is not volume. It's ownership. And that was the moment Mark froze. The house did not explode into chaos. No one shouted. No one stormed out. The silence was worse than that. 42 relatives stood in my living room holding casserole dishes and plastic containers, while a realtor quietly closed his leather folder. Mark cleared his throat. I apologize for any confusion, he said evenly. Without written authorization from Mr. Lawson as sole trustee, there can be no listing. Lauren's mother blinked. Trustee. Eric tried to recover. It's just paperwork. No, I said calmly. It's structure. Structure unsettles people who rely on assumption. Mark nodded to me once and left. The black SUV backed out of the driveway slowly, as if not wanting to disturb the air. The relatives began murmuring. Someone laughed awkwardly. Someone else said, well, let's eat. Lauren's face flushed a shade I hadn't seen before. You could have told us, she said quietly. I did, I replied. You chose not to listen. Eric pulled me aside near the kitchen. Dad, this is humiliating. For whom? For all of us. No, I said gently. For the part that assumed ownership. He ran his hand through his hair. We weren't trying to take your house. You were rehearsing. What does that even mean? It means you were acting as if the transition had already occurred. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. That night, I did not sleep in the garage. I did not sleep in a hotel either. I slept in my own bed. The mattress in the garage remained leaning against the wall. It became a symbol more than a solution. The next morning, the house felt different. The relatives moved more carefully. Lauren's parents avoided eye contact. Conversations were lower in volume. After breakfast, I asked Eric to sit down with me in the study. Lauren hovered near the doorway. We need clarity, I said. You got it last night, Eric replied. No, I said. We got exposure. That's different. I opened the fireproof box and removed the full trust document. The Lawson Family Trust was drafted in 2001, I said, after your mother and I met with Elaine Porter. Lauren crossed her arms. This feels dramatic. It's administrative, I replied. I turned to the section outlining authority. As sole surviving trustee, I retain full control over all assets held in trust, including the property at 112 Oak Ridge Lane. Eric's eyes moved across the page. You never told us it was structured like that. You never asked. Silence. You assumed it would default to you, I continued. Eventually, it will be distributed equally between you and your sister. But eventually is not now. Lauren spoke up. We were thinking ahead. You were thinking forward, I corrected, without checking the foundation. There is a difference between planning and presuming. Eric leaned back in his chair. We just didn't want to be caught unprepared. Prepared for what? For something happening. Something always happens, I said, but it doesn't accelerate because you measure it. Lauren's father entered the room quietly. Are we in the way? He asked. No, I replied. You are guests. He nodded slowly. That word shifted the dynamic. Guests do not reassign bedrooms. Guests do not measure walls. Guests do not bring realtors. By Sunday evening, the house had returned to relative normalcy. 42 guests had become 20. The folding tables were removed. The garage mattress was returned to the corner. But something else had shifted beneath the surface. Eric began asking different questions. Are your accounts separate from the house? He asked one afternoon while we washed dishes. Yes. Are they in the trust too? Yes. And if something happened medically? There is a successor trustee clause. Who? Elaine. He looked surprised. You named your lawyer. I named neutrality. Lauren stepped closer. Why not us? Because structure prevents pressure. That sentence lingered. They hadn't thought about pressure, only about proximity. That week, I made an appointment with Elaine. Not because I was angry, because I was early. Has anyone attempted to challenge the trust? She asked. Not legally. But they attempted assumption. She nodded knowingly. We can reinforce it. How? By recording a memorandum of trust with the county. It makes the structure public record. Do it. Documentation does not accuse. It protects. On Tuesday morning, I returned to the county clerk's office with Elaine. We filed the memorandum. The clerk stamped it with a heavy, audible thud. That sound felt more final than the conversation at Thanksgiving. When I returned home, Eric was waiting in the driveway. You went to the courthouse, he said. Yes. You think we're trying to sue you? No, I replied. I think clarity belongs in public record. He exhaled slowly. This feels like you don't trust us. I trust you as my son, I said. I do not trust assumption. Laren joined us on the porch. Are we being punished? She asked. No. Then what is this? It's reinforcement. There's a difference between punishment and perimeter. One retaliates. The other defines. That evening, Lauren approached me alone in the kitchen. I didn't mean to push you out, she said quietly. You did. I was overwhelmed. With 42 relatives. With expectations. Expectations of what? That we'd inherit something stable. You will, I said, but stability doesn't require displacement. She nodded slowly. I see that now. It was not a grand apology. It was incremental awareness. And incremental awareness builds more sustainably than dramatic remorse. By the end of the week, the relatives had gone. The house was quiet again. The oak tree in the front yard dropped a few leaves across the driveway. I stood in the garage one evening and looked at the twin mattress. I didn't feel insulted anymore. I felt informed, because that mattress had shown me something important. It showed me how quickly a narrative can shift from safety to surrender. It showed me how easily proximity can become presumption. And it showed me that calm documentation is stronger than emotional defense. Eric stepped into the garage behind me. You're not going anywhere, he said. No. I understand that now. That's good. He looked at the mattress. I should have asked. Yes. And I shouldn't have assumed. No. Silence filled the garage, but it was different from before. Less tense. More reflective. There is a moment in every conflict when someone realizes they pushed too far. That realization doesn't erase the push, but it changes the direction. And direction matters more than pride. Thanksgiving had begun with displacement. It ended with documentation. And documentation, once recorded, does not fade. It anchors. The question now was not whether I would sleep in the garage. The question was whether they would stop measuring what was never theirs. And that answer would not come in argument. It would come in restraint. On both sides. The call came on a Wednesday morning, 3 weeks after Thanksgiving. It wasn't from Eric. It wasn't from Lauren. It was from Mark Reynolds. Mr. Lawson, he said carefully, I wanted to let you know something directly. I'm listening. I received an email this morning from your daughter-in-law asking whether pre-listing photography could be scheduled just to prepare for the spring market. There it was. Even after the trust conversation, even after the county filing. Preparation. Preparation is the polite word for movement. And what did you tell her? I asked. I told her I cannot photograph or advertise property without written authorization from the trustee. And she said you might change your mind. I smiled. I won't. I assumed as much. Silence lingered. I thought you'd want to know, he added. I appreciate that. When you are steady long enough, third parties begin to respect the steadiness. I hung up and walked to the study. I opened the fireproof box again. Trust certification. Recorded memorandum. Property deed. Everything in order. And then I did something different. I called David. She's still pushing, I said. For what? Spring listing preparation. David exhaled slowly. That's not confusion. That's timeline control. Yes. What are you going to do? Nothing. Nothing. Pressure reveals itself when it isn't met. There is a difference between escalation and exposure. That evening, I invited Eric and Lauren to sit down again. Not in the kitchen. In the living room. No guests, no relatives, no audience. Just the three of us. I received a call from Mark, I said calmly. Lauren's posture stiffened. He told me about the photography request. It was just to be ready, she said quickly. For what? For whenever. Whenever, I repeated. Eric leaned forward. We just don't want to scramble later. You're scrambling now. Silence. I've made something clear, I continued. There will be no listing, no photography, no preparation, not in spring, not in summer, not in speculation. Lauren looked frustrated. You're being stubborn. No, I said. I'm being consistent. Eric rubbed his forehead. Dad, this feels like you're shutting us out. I am shutting out presumption. That's not fair. Fair would have been asking. The air in the room shifted. This wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about structure. Let me ask you something, I said. Do you believe I am incapable of managing my own property? No, Eric replied immediately. Do you believe I am unsafe? He hesitated. No. Then why are you acting as if I am already gone? That question did not require a raised voice. It required silence. Lauren's eyes filled slightly. We're scared, she said. Of what? Of being unprepared. Unprepared for what? For when something happens. Something will happen, I said, but you cannot schedule it. Eric leaned back in his chair. You think we're trying to push you out. I think you are trying to control timing. That's not malicious. No, I agreed. It's impatient. Impatience and malice are not the same. But impatience can do the same damage. There was a long pause. Then something unexpected happened. Lauren spoke differently. I don't want to feel like we're waiting, she said quietly. Waiting for what? For your life to end. There it was. Raw. Unfiltered. That sentence changed the temperature more than any accusation. You are not waiting, I said. You are living alongside. But the house. The house is not a countdown clock. Eric's shoulders dropped slightly. I didn't see it like that. Because you were standing too close. Sometimes distance is not physical. It's perspective. I stood and walked to the bookshelf. I pulled out an old photo album. Inside were pictures of Eric at age 8, helping me build the deck. Of Lauren the first Christmas she joined us. Of Margaret smiling in the kitchen. This house is not leverage, I said quietly. It is history. Lauren wiped her eyes. I never meant to treat it like a transaction. But you did. Yes. There was no defensiveness in her voice now. Just acknowledgement. I need you to hear something clearly, I said. I am not fragile, I am not confused, and I am not transitional. Eric nodded slowly. We heard you. Then stop preparing for absence. Silence followed. Not heavy. Not sharp. Just honest. 2 days later, something else happened. Mark called again. Mr. Lawson, he said, I received a follow-up email from your daughter-in-law canceling any future listing discussions. And she apologized. That mattered. Not because of me. Because of him. Public pressure had dissolved. External confirmation had shifted the internal narrative. Documentation had done its work. That Sunday, Eric came over alone. He stood in the driveway, before knocking. "I've been thinking," he said when I opened the door. "That's good." I kept telling myself this was about safety. It was. It was about control. Yes. And I didn't like feeling powerless. Powerlessness does not grant authority. He nodded. "I see that now." It was the first time he had said that without qualification. "I don't want to measure your house again," he said quietly. "Good. And I don't want to schedule your life." "That's better." He managed a faint smile. "You're not going anywhere." "No. Not to the garage. Not to a facility." "No." Silence. Then something softer. "Dad, I'm sorry." This time, it was not a strategic apology. It was personal. And that difference changes everything. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "I know. Reconciliation is not dramatic. It is gradual. It is the slow removal of measuring tapes. It is the quiet closing of real estate files. It is the acknowledgement that steadiness is not weakness." And the house remained standing. Not because I fought, but because I refused to be repositioned. The last thing I said that night was simple. You don't protect someone by moving them out of their own life. Eric nodded. And this time, there was no argument left to make. The garage mattress stayed in the corner for weeks. No one moved it. No one mentioned it. It leaned against the workbench like a quiet reminder of how close things had come to shifting in a direction none of us were ready to admit. I didn't remove it immediately. I wanted it there, not as punishment. As perspective. By December, the house felt steadier, not because the conflict had vanished, but because the urgency behind it had. Lauren came by one afternoon without Eric. She stood in the kitchen holding 2 mugs of coffee and didn't sit down right away. "I've been thinking about that night," she said quietly. "Which one?" I asked. "The garage one." I nodded. "I wasn't trying to disrespect you," she continued. "I honestly thought it was practical. 42 people, not enough beds. It seemed obvious." "It was obvious," I said, "just not in the way you meant." She looked confused. "It was obvious you hadn't considered what that request meant." She sat down across from me. "I didn't think about symbolism," she admitted. "That's because you were focused on logistics." She nodded slowly. "I see now it wasn't just a mattress." "No," I said gently. "It was a message." Silence. "I don't want to send that message again," she said. "That's good." The apology wasn't theatrical. It wasn't wrapped in tears or dramatics. It was quiet, thoughtful, and that mattered more. Over the next few weeks, something shifted in small, measurable ways. Lauren stopped saying our house when she referred to the property. She said your house. Eric stopped talking about when we eventually and began saying whenever you decide. Language reveals mindset. On Christmas Eve, we gathered again in the same dining room. Fewer guests this time, no folding tables, no extra chairs stacked against the wall. Eric carved the turkey. Lauren poured drinks. I remained in the master bedroom. At one point, Lauren's father pulled me aside. "I owe you something," he said. "For what?" "For assuming." He looked embarrassed. "I thought they were preparing you for transition." "They were preparing themselves," I replied. He nodded slowly. "I see that now." It struck me then how quickly narratives travel through extended families. A single suggestion about safety can become a collective assumption. Clarity must be just as deliberate. In January, I invited Eric and Lauren to meet with Elaine. Not because I was revising the trust out of anger, because structure prevents confusion. We sat in her office, while she reviewed the Lawson family trust clause by clause. The trust remains intact, she explained. Thomas retains full authority as sole trustee. No amendments have been made regarding property transfer. Lauren listened carefully. I don't want to change it, she said. Good, I replied. Elaine looked at me. You mentioned a potential addition. Yes. I added a clause stating that any proposed listing or property valuation discussion during my lifetime must originate from me in writing. It wasn't punitive. It was preventative. Eric read the amendment carefully. That makes sense, he said. Structure isn't distrust, I told him. It's clarity. He nodded. I understand that now. The garage mattress was finally removed in February. Not by me. By Eric. He carried it back to the storage shed without comment. That small act carried more weight than an argument ever could. One evening in early spring, Eric came by alone. We sat on the porch as the sun dipped behind the oak tree. I've been thinking about something, he said. That's a good start. He smiled faintly. I realized I wasn't trying to move you out of the house. No. I was trying to move myself into the future. I let that sit. And the house felt like proof of stability, he continued. If it was secured, then everything else felt secure. That's understandable, I said. But I did it the wrong way. Yes. He looked down at his hands. I acted like you were already halfway gone. That's the part that mattered. He nodded. I won't do that again. I believe you. There's a difference between hearing apology and recognizing growth. Growth shows in repetition, not in speeches. By the time summer arrived, the tension had dissolved into something steadier. Lauren began asking before suggesting changes. Would you like help repainting the hallway? She asked one afternoon. Yes, I replied. Would you like me to organize the pantry? No. And that was accepted. Consent restored balance. On the anniversary of Margaret's passing, the three of us stood together in the living room. No one mentioned safety. No one mentioned transition. We talked about her laugh, about the way she insisted on yellow curtains in the kitchen. Eric turned to me. You built this place with her. Yes. And it's yours. Yes. Not eventually. Not conditionally. Present tense. Ownership acknowledged out loud. The following Thanksgiving came quietly. 20 guests, no more. No grocery lists thrown onto tables, no measuring tapes, no assumptions about bedrooms. At 7:41 p.m., I sat at the head of the table again. Lauren leaned toward me. Is everything all right? She asked. Yes. Good. She smiled. And that was enough. If you're listening to this, and someone has told you you're not safe living alone anymore, pause before you react. Ask what the real fear is. Is it about stairs and ice? Or is it about uncertainty? There's nothing wrong with planning. There's nothing wrong with concern. But there is something wrong with repositioning someone without consent. Authority is not arrogance. Boundaries are not hostility. And staying steady in your own home is not stubbornness. It is dignity. The house still stands. The trust still holds. The oak tree still drops leaves across the driveway. And no one measures it anymore. Not because I shouted. Not because I punished. But because I clarified. Sometimes the quietest response is the strongest one. Set down the fork. Stand your ground. And let clarity do the work.